Today, we will be exploring the digestive system. Our digestive system is a vital system within our body that is responsible for the breakdown of large food molecules into molecules that are small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream and used by cells. Besides the act of chewing and beginning swallowing, the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system controls the involuntary movement of food through the digestive system, since smooth muscles line the organs of the digestive system. The digestive system includes the mouth, tongue, teeth, salivary glands, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. Each of these components has a certain role to play within the system. With that being said, some components have different functions depending on the type of molecule that's being digested, whether the food is made up of carbohydrates, proteins, or fats. Alright, so let's find out what each part of the digestive system does. Food first enters the mouth, where its mechanical digestion begins. Teeth break the food into smaller pieces, increasing the surface area, thus allowing digestion to take place faster. The chemical digestion of carbohydrates, specifically starch, also begins in the mouth when salivary glands release saliva. Saliva contains salivary amylase, which breaks down starch into maltose, a smaller disaccharide. Additionally, saliva moistens all the food particles and binds them together, forming a bolus of food that's ready to move through the alimentary canal. Next, the tongue pushes the bolus of food into the pharynx. Peristaltic contractions push the food in one direction through the pharynx and into the esophagus, where the food continues moving downward in one direction. When the cardiac sphincter opens, the bolus of food is then allowed to enter the stomach. The main function of the cardiac sphincter is to prevent the food from the stomach from being regurgitated back into the esophagus. The stomach typically has a much lower pH than the rest of the digestive system in order to activate certain enzymes. Therefore, the cardiac sphincter also prevents hydrochloric acid from entering the esophagus. When the bolus of food enters into the stomach secretes the hormone gastrin, which in turn stimulates gastric juice secretion. Gastric juice contains HCl, mucus, and digestive enzymes, with the most important one being pepsinogen. When in contact with HCl, pepsinogen becomes pepsin, which breaks larger proteins into smaller polypeptides. While the stomach does only contribute to the chemical digestion of proteins, the stomach muscles do churn and squeeze all food molecules into a paste called chyme. Chyme then passes through the pyloric sphincter and into the duodenum of the small intestine. The main function of the small intestine is to complete the chemical digestion of food and remove nutrients by absorption. None of this could take place, though, without the small intestine's trusty old friend and its accessory organ, the pancreas. The pancreas has numerous roles, but right now we're going to focus on its secretion of pancreatic juice into the small intestine. When exposed to acidic chyme, cells in the duodenum release a hormone called secretin. Secretin then travels to the pancreas, stimulating the release of sodium bicarbonate ions with the pancreatic juice. The sodium bicarbonate ions neutralize the chyme entering from the stomach. Besides sodium bicarbonate ions, pancreatic juice contains a variety of digestive enzymes, including those necessary to break down carbohydrates, amylase, maltase, sucrase, and lactase, lipids, lipases, nucleotides, nucleases, and proteins, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. These enzymes cleave their respective molecules into smaller pieces that can eventually be absorbed by the villi of the small intestine. The other important secretion into the small intestine is bile. When cells in the duodenum and jejunum are exposed to food, these cells secrete CCK. CCK not only stimulates the pancreas to release pancreatic digestive enzymes mentioned earlier, but CCK also stimulates the gallbladder to contract and release bile into the small intestine. Bile contains bile salts that emulsify large fat globules into small fat droplets, which are then broken into fatty acids and glycerol by lipase. From the villi, broken down carbohydrates and proteins travel through the hepatic portal vein to the liver, where they are detoxified, stored, and built, while the lacteal carries away fatty acids and glycerol. Later on, we'll return to the liver, although right now we're going to continue on through the alimentary canal. The remaining residual from the small intestine is then transported through the ileocecal sphincter to the large intestine, where no chemical digestion takes place. Instead, the primary function of the large intestine is to remove water. Curves called haustra slow the movement of food through the large intestine so the maximum amount of water can be removed. We interrupt this message for a fun fact. The length of an organism's intestine depends on its diet. A larger intestine corresponds to a plant-based diet because plants are harder to break down and therefore require more time to be processed. Now back to the normal program. Also within the large intestine is a large amount of bacteria that feed on the remains, producing vitamins and minerals that our own bodies can't produce. After the water is removed, the leftover waste, now called feces, continues moving through the large intestine, where it eventually is stored in the rectum. Finally, when the internal anal sphincter, which is made up of smooth muscle, under involuntary control, and the external anal sphincter, which is made up of skeletal muscle, under voluntary control, both contract, the feces is pushed through the anus and excreted from the body. While we just went over the alimentary canal, it is important to know about the accessory digestive organs, which produce and secrete the fluids necessary to break down food. These include the salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. In this video, we've already talked about the salivary glands as the glands that release saliva, which begins the digestion of starch and moistens food for swallowing, so we'll move on to the liver. Besides being the largest internal organ in the human body, the liver is responsible for a number of key processes. The liver stores nutrients that aren't immediately needed and helps maintain blood glucose levels by assembling glucose into long chains of glycogen. Additionally, the liver oxidizes fatty acids, synthesizes phospholipids and cholesterol, and forms proteins. While all of these processes are very helpful, two of the most important functions of the liver are removing toxic substances from the blood and producing bile. The bile produced in the liver is sent to another accessory organ, the gallbladder, which stores the bile. When stimulated by CCK, the gallbladder then secretes bile into the small intestine. As explained before, the bile breaks large fat globules into small fat droplets, which then can be broken into fatty acids and glycerol by lipase. And last but not least, the pancreas. We've already learned about how the pancreas secretes pancreatic juice containing digestive enzymes and bicarbonate ions into the small intestine. What we haven't mentioned, though, is the role of the pancreas in secreting the hormones insulin and glucagon into the bloodstream. Insulin is released by the pancreas in response to high blood glucose levels. Insulin aids in the conversion of glucose into glycogen, which is then removed from the bloodstream and stored in tissues, thus decreasing the blood glucose levels. Glucagon is released by the pancreas in response to low blood glucose levels. Glucagon aids in the conversion of glycogen back into glucose, which is then added back into the bloodstream, thus increasing blood glucose levels. Therefore, both of these pathways are negative feedback loops. Wow, that's a lot of information. Together, all of these organs and processes help to make sure your body gets the proper amount of nutrients and then also regulates their levels within the bloodstream. Each of these organs plays a specific role, so we want to say thank you, Digestive System, and thank you for watching, and I hope you learned more about the human digestive system.